People who explore abandoned places, what is the scariest or weirdest thing you found? Had a creepy abandoned house in my neighborhood. It was totally normal as kids to go in, check out the expired eggs and milk among other things in the fridge. The house was absolutely trashed, but it was, if nothing was ever taken, so it was full of crap. My parents also spent time in there and came across a folder of news clippings and notes from interviews the owner of the house had with police about local unsolved murders. As far as we know, the case is still unsolved, and the owner of the house hasn't been seen in over a decade now. My mum has submitted everything to the police. I went with a group of friends to go to an old textile mill. When we got near the roof, one of my friends nearly fell through the floor. Some of the wooden boards had rotted out over time and couldn't support his weight. Had he fallen, he would easily have been in intensive care, if not worse given where we were. Not anything particularly wild, just a reminder that, if you do go to an abandoned place, be careful. Many of these places haven't been taken care of for a long time, and can be very dangerous. There's a house about a block away from mine, that looks identical to the one from Monster House. Very old house with small gargoyle statues by the steps. Basically every kid in the neighborhood has broken in to look around at least once. My older brother and his friends did, and he told me stories of the house as a kid. So one day, when I had 5 or 6 friends over, we decided to check it out for ourselves. Unfortunately, my story isn't anything insane, because we had to rush out of there, but there were 2 things that stood out as extremely bizarre. First, there was a toilet that was fully functional and positioned in the middle of the living room. Guess the homie Awa didn't like having to get up and walk to the bathroom. And second, there was an upstairs with no way to get to it. No stairs, no opening where the stairs used to be, and no obvious temporary patch to block off the upstairs for any reason. There just appears to never have really been a way to get up there, but it makes no sense. About 15 years ago, my boyfriend and I were looking for a spot to fool around, so we went to a nearby construction site. We noticed the road kept going past the construction site into the woods. So we followed the road, and there was an abandoned house at the end of it. The next day I went back in the daylight with a buddy, and we saw that there was a second abandoned house further back. The first house was easy to get into and had nothing particularly interesting in it. The second house was boarded up. I'll call my buddy Jill. Jill and I finally managed to break some boards on the back window. Then we used the broken boards to break the window. We crawled in the window. Once we got in, we pushed a chair up to window sill we'd come in from, so we could get out without cutting ourselves. Then we turned around and saw that the walls were covered with spray paint saying things like "kill yourself" and "they're coming" and "die." We assumed other teenagers had done it. The kitchen had tons of smashed dishes. The furniture in the house looked like an axe had been taken to most of it. Then we came to a room with an extremely detailed map of our town drawn on the walls. It looked like it was from the 70s due to certain labels on stores. The map had people's names on houses and the words "good" or "bad" after them. After that room, we decided to head out. We walked back into the living room, and behind the chair we had pushed up to the window, the wall now had spray paint saying "get out of my house," which was definitely not there when we had pushed the chair there at the beginning. I ripped my pants on the window. I was so terrified while trying to get the crap out of there. We were exploring an old veteran cemetery on the outskirts of our town very late one night. We went in there looking for ghosts with high frequency recording equipment and cameras. It was our first year in college, so we were all about 18 to 19 years old. There were 2 sections of the cemetery, a much older, larger section, and a section full of thousands of the small, government-provided veteran headstones. The older section was what you would expect in a cemetery: old tombs, unmarked graves, and huge, ancient trees. We parked near the veteran area of the cemetery and proceeded through. Once we entered the older section of the cemetery, we started hearing voices. Of course we pressed on, thinking they were ghost voices. Nope. Several large thugs were conducting some business deep within the larger, older section of the cemetery. As we approached, they spotted us first and started yelling something to the tune of "you shouldn't be here" and "you better fucking run," all while laughing like they were insane. They proceeded to run after us. We raced through the cemetery and hid behind some tombstones while we listened to their footsteps running around the cemetery looking for us. That was the scariest part, waiting to be found in the dark. Then the cops showed up. Apparently someone had seen all the activity. The thugs went quiet and took off back towards the old part of the cemetery, presumably to get what they had left down there where the cops were headed. While the cops and thugs headed down to the deeper, darker area of the cemetery, we bolted to the car. That was the last time we went ghost hunting in a cemetery. When I was first renting my brother's basement, just off the property was an old railroad station. Since it was a college town, students would sometimes drop off mattress or couches there. Judging by the decorating, at some point some kids dropped acid and painted eyes and swirls in pyramids with white and yellow paint. While exploring, I found a cardboard box with some school papers, a few snapshots, and some personal items. There was a psych eval, some legal documents about mental health. The last dates were of the middle of the last winter. What I put together was a kid was released from juvenile detention with a cardboard box in the middle of winter, and this old railroad depot was his only place to go. The box was all he had, and he abandoned that too. I've been exploring abandoned buildings for a while, mostly hospitals, malls, nursing homes, etc. I know other people have had way scarier moments than me, but I recall I was exploring an abandoned nursing home by myself. Now this is a place I've been to several times before. Now to set the stage, it's a windy fall day. The wind is howling through the open doors and windows in the building. The building is creaking, leaves are blowing around outside below the dark grey clouds above. Basically, any Stephen King movie, especially since this also was in Maine. As I'm standing in one of the rooms taking photos, listening to the wind, I swear I heard voices coming from the other end of the building. Not other people, but like your classic whisper of a voice that somehow came from far away. I ended up getting out of there pretty quick and haven't gone back since. I found a broken noose in the attic at an abandoned house. It looked like it was ripped, not cleanly cut. Also found what looked to be a suicide note in what I assume was the kitchen. Whole floor caved into the basement below it. Whether this was someone was playing a joke or not, I'll never know. Never found any info on the place and it's since been torn down. This was like 11 to 12 years ago. I wish I still had the photos of the noose. In recent years, I'd have to say the time my friend and I were going to an abandoned asylum. We made our way through the woods, and I was telling her how the last time I was there I saw security back at the building we were about to pop out at, and if we see a white truck to just run and hide. Right then she goes, "Oh fuck, there's a truck right there." But it was a red truck, not white. No traffic is permitted on the roads the asylum buildings are on, except security. You can't even get past the gate unless you work at the nearby buildings still in use. With nowhere to run or hide, we just came out of the woods and were in a little woodless area. Just before we got to the first building, we ducked down to the grass and covered our heads, as if that would somehow hide us. Haha. I'm staring at the truck hoping I could will it to leave, and it backs up. I think okay sweet, and it stops again, and the engine shuts off. Passenger gets out, looks at us, turns back and gets something out of the truck, then throws it into the air. It's a goddamn hawk. This guy had a hawk. I look to my friend and we are both so confused. The guy turns to us and asks if everything's okay. We stay silent as we're so confused. He again asks us if we are okay, and my friend sits up and goes yee, and he just shrugs. The hawk lands back on his arm. He gets in the car and they leave. We just look at each other like what the actual fuck. We later saw them driving around the asylum still. I told this story on here before and someone mentioned something about a bird training place not too far away, so it was probably someone from there. I don't remember exactly what they said, but it was still really fucking weird, especially considering no one's allowed on those roads, and the party was on only security is allowed on. When I was 9, me and my older brother, who was 13 at the time, would go to Scene's house, who was this nice 30-year-old man that lived in the house down the street behind our house. I used to live in Detroit, so the houses are pretty old and are separated by alleys. That would play basketball with us and would casually say hi. Nothing weird about the guy. Well, all of a sudden he left or died. We don't really know what happened to him, but his house stayed vacant for years. So one day my brother and I decided to break into his house. The house had all wood furniture, wooden toys with papers on desks and dishes in the cabinets. A pretty well kept house. My brother decided to check the upstairs, and while I checked the kitchen, In the kitchen, I found a wooden stool in the middle of the kitchen with 4 books on top of it and a rope hanging down from the fan. No noose, no nothing, but I think about this all the time. What the hell happened to scene?